Camilla finally cracks after George reveals shocking truth about stolen royal jewels. The silence inside the Heron Wing was unlike anything Catherine had experienced. Deep within Kensington Palace, hidden behind layers of security and royal history, it felt like time had paused. The stained glass windows filtered pale sunlight across centuries-old stone, casting fragmented rainbows on the marble floors. In this archive, surrounded by relics of a woman she had never met, Catherine felt Diana's presence more strongly than ever. She wasn't just cataloging heirlooms, she was guarding a legacy. And that legacy had just been violated. She ran her gloved fingers over the spine of the old green ledger again, flipping to the page with the missing entries. Her eyes froze on the names, the Spencer pearl necklace and the Qatar earring. Gone. No sign of forced entry, no alarms, nothing on the logs. Just vanished. She tried to rationalize it, a clerical error, a misplacement, but she knew better. These items were sealed by order of Queen Elizabeth herself, untouchable, unmovable, unless... Her breath caught as she remembered the biometric system. It was impossible to disable without the highest level of clearance. Only a handful of people in the entire monarchy had that kind of access, and one of them, maybe the only one bold enough to use it without permission, was Queen Camila. Still, Catherine hadn't said it aloud, not even to William, until now. The gala 2 days later should have been a celebration, a tribute to Diana's humanitarian legacy. Instead, it turned into a powder keg waiting to explode. Catherine stood beside William, their public faces on, but privately they were unraveling. Then, amid the formal chatter and the soft swirl of violence, the fuse was lit by the most unexpected voice in the room. "Mom?" George asked, his voice innocent and clear. "Why is Laura wearing Grandma's earrings?" Catherine blinked. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, she turned to follow her son's gaze, and there they were, on Laura Loeb's, Camilla's stepdaughter, the Qatar earrings. Diana's earrings, glittering like ghosts from the past under the ballroom lights. Everything froze. Laura's smile faltered as she caught Catherine's eyes. Her hand instinctively reached to touch her ear, as if trying to protect the truth. But it was too late. Catherine had memorized every detail of those earrings in the days since they'd gone missing. The gold filigree, the shape of each pearl, even the tiny micro-etched numbers on the back of the setting. There was no doubt. William had seen them too. He stepped to Catherine's side in seconds, his expression dark, unreadable, but she could feel it, the quiet storm building behind his calm exterior. They had tried to keep things quiet, tried to find answers privately, but now their mother's memory had been dragged into the open, wearing a black gown and sipping champagne like nothing happened. Catherine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She just asked the question, cool and sharp. "Laura, where did you get those earrings?" Laura's face went white. She stammered something about a gift, something about Camilla and an auction, but her voice barely carried. The room had gone so quiet it felt like everyone had stopped breathing. Minutes later, the royal appraiser arrived, quietly summoned by William. The ballroom turned into a courtroom, the chandelier spotlighting every anxious face. The scanner confirmed what Catherine already knew, 100% match. These were Diana's earrings. Camilla, standing at the far end of the room, stepped forward with a practiced calm that barely covered the storm beneath. She claimed innocence, claimed she had bought them from a reputable auction house. But there was no record of that auction, no paperwork, no receipts, and everyone knew it. The marble walls of the private council room at Buckingham felt colder than usual, like the palace itself was recoiling from what had just unfolded. Camilla sat stiffly across from William and Catherine, surrounded by royal advisors and legal staff who suddenly looked far less loyal than they had the week before. Her expression, normally unreadable, was breaking. The queen, who had weathered decades of scrutiny, was now visibly shaken. William didn't bother hiding his anger anymore. He leaned forward, his voice clipped and controlled. The biometric system was disabled. Only 3 people in the royal household have that clearance. You're one of them, and your name is the only one on the access log from April 9th. Camilla tried to maintain composure. "I was preparing for an exhibit. I believed I had the right to review the collection." "There was no exhibit," Catherine said. Her tone was gentler but carried far more weight. "And you weren't accompanied by a single curator or official. You went in alone, and then somehow the earrings show up on your daughter's ears." I didn't steal anything, Camilla snapped, her voice rising as her composure began to fracture. This is a witch hunt. You've always wanted to paint me as the villain, and now you're using Diana's memory to do it. You don't get to talk about her, William said, his voice low and sharp. You may have rewritten your story in the public eye, but not this. Not my mother's legacy. The lead advisor, a gray-haired man with years of royal service, cleared his throat. With the evidence presented, we recommend suspending Queen Camila's access to the royal archives and removing her from all planning related to Diana's memorials until this is resolved. Camilla's knuckles went white around the edges of the table. She looked at each advisor, hoping for someone, anyone, to defend her. No one met her gaze. You're siding with them? She asked, stunned. After everything I've done for this family? One of the younger lawyers, clearly uncomfortable, shifted in her seat. We're not taking sides. We're protecting the monarchy. Camilla's face darkened. She stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table. You all forget. I'm the queen. I have earned this position. I won't be erased by ghosts and sentiment. No one's trying to erase you, Cabrera said quietly, but Diana's legacy was sealed for Charlotte, for William's daughter, and it was never yours to give away. How was it? The line that split the room like a blade. Later that evening, William signed an internal order with the full approval of the Royal Council. Camilla's security clearance was revoked. She would no longer have access to the Royal Heritage Vaults, nor be allowed to appear at any events directly tied to Diana's legacy. The decision wasn't announced to the public. There was no press release, but behind the palace walls, it was a seismic shift in power. At Clarence House, Camilla received the letter in silence. She sat in her grand parlor, surrounded by relics of old paintings and tapestries, but the room felt hollow. For all the battle she'd won to stand beside Charles as queen, this defeat cut deeper than any tabloid headline. The royal car waiting outside would take her to Ray Mill House, her private estate in Wiltshire. Officially, she was on retreat. Unofficially, she had been exiled. Back at Kensington, Catherine stood alone in the new archive room. The security was unbreachable now. No blind spots, no overrides. She carefully placed the recovered earrings and Diana's wedding bracelet into their new display cases. She whispered softly to herself, "Charlotte will have what's hers. No one will ever touch it again." The morning sun cast a soft glow over the palace gardens as Princess Charlotte skipped across the lawn, a daisy crown sitting slightly crooked on her head. Her laughter echoed through the hedges while Catherine watched from the stone bench nearby, her thoughts far from the playful scene. In her lap sat a leather-bound folder, new security protocols for the archive, final copies of the Preservation of Bloodline Heirlooms Act, and the updated access list. Only two names remained, hers and Charlotte's future guardian, to be appointed 18 years from now. Inside the fortified vault beneath Kensington, the sapphire ring rested under bulletproof glass. Beside it lay the Spencer necklace and the Qatar earrings, untouched, sealed, sacred. Each artifact had been fitted with upgraded micro-etching tags and smart chips that track temperature, location, and movement in real time. Even a shadow couldn't pass unnoticed now. William entered the garden, his suit crisp, the decree for the Preservation Act tucked under his arm. He looked over at Charlotte, then at Catherine. "Everything's finalized," he said. "No one outside our direct bloodline can access anything tied to Mum, not even by accident." Catherine nodded. "Good. That's how it should be." Across the city, at Ray Mill House, Camilla sat in a high-backed chair by the window, staring out at the distant Wiltshire countryside. Her phone buzzed occasionally with messages from palace staff and media teams, but she didn't answer any of them. Her portrait had already been removed from 2 upcoming royal brochures, her name omitted from planning meetings. She hadn't spoken to Charles in days, the Queen in name only. Her isolation was thick with silence. No press storm, no press defense, just quiet, biting solitude. The Daily Mirror ran a subtle but pointed article titled, "The Queen Who Went Too Far." Public sentiment had shifted, and it wasn't subtle. Catherine, once seen as reserved and diplomatic, had become a guardian figure in the eyes of the nation. The people were rallying behind her. Justice for Diana trended again. Old footage of Diana with her boys flooded social media. The court of public opinion had spoken, and it wasn't on Camilla's side. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Camilla wandered into her study and opened an old drawer. Inside was a velvet box, empty now. She stared at it, the weight of what she'd done finally catching up with her. She had spent her life trying to rewrite her story, but this time, there would be no edits, no second drafts. At Kensington, William stood over the archive register, his signature etched beside a new line, legacy restricted to direct descendant. He felt the finality of it, the power of it. For so long, his mother had been spoken of in memories, in portraits, in carefully worded tributes, but now, her presence was locked into the very systems that protected the crown. Not symbolic, literal. He turned to Catherine, who was gently guiding Charlotte into the room. The little girl stared wide-eyed at the cases. "Are those Grandma Diana's?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "They are," Catherine said, kneeling beside her. "One day they'll be yours. But not just to wear, to protect." Charlotte nodded as if she understood the weight of that promise. Back in the garden, Charlotte twirled in the sunlight, her laughter bright. Catherine stood beside William, both watching their daughter, unaware of the storm she had unknowingly exposed. A single question, spoken with innocence, had cracked open years of silence and secrets. And now, the legacy was safe. Not because it belonged to history, but because someone finally stood up and said, "This ends here."